If you walk into any grocery store in America, there is a pretty good chance it's about to be owned by one single mega grocery store corporation. And that's really bad news for the prices you pay.
A massive supermarket merger could change how millions of Americans shop for groceries.
Kroger, the nation's largest supermarket chain, is merging with its rival Albertsons,
Potentially creating a grocery empire.
Safeway, Ralph's, Smith's, Harris Teeters, Shaw's, King's, Randalls, and about 25 other brands will all be owned by a single company if the Kroger-Albertsons merger goes through.
Now they claim the merger will, quote, lower grocery prices. Should we take Kroger and Albertsons executives at their word?
In a word, no.
In 6, get the fuck out of here.
This mega grocery store merger is bad news for everyone, except a few top executives and shareholders on Wall Street. Here's why.
My name is Errol Schweitzer. I'm the former vice president of grocery for Whole Foods Market. I have over 25 years in the food industry.
And I'm Benjamin Lohr, author of The Secret Life of Groceries. I spent 5 years studying the grocery industry as a journalist.
Kroger is already the number 2 grocer in America with over $130 billion in annual sales. Albertsons is number 4 with over $70 billion in annual sales. If allowed to go through, this massive new firm would command over $210 billion per year in sales, or over 15% of the US grocery market, and the lives of over 700,000 people who stock, pick, sweep, or ring registers on your behalf.
To put it bluntly, this deal is an antitrust travesty. In a time of record food prices and skyrocketing corporate profits, it should be criminal in the moral sense to even suggest it. And it might actually be criminal in a legal sense too.
But this merger isn't just the product of 2 bad actors. It's the inevitable outcome of a broken grocery system.
Clean up on aisle busted.
To understand why, we need to go back and study grocery history.
Supermarket, symbol of the high standard of living in this country today. These products come from farms and ranches despite distance and season.
You might find it funny, but the supermarket was truly a miraculous American innovation. Before the supermarket, Americans spent about 40% of our budget on food. Today, we spend less than 10%. It's the lowest percent in the world and shrinking every year. Before supermarkets, grocery stores were horribly inefficient and expensive. Then a very American discovery was made. A manager at Kroger, at that time just a small regional chain, realized if he made everything bigger, he could also make everything cheaper. Bigger stores meant less warehousing, staffing, and construction costs. And then he took those lower costs and he passed them on to the customer, using the power of size to lower prices. It changed everything.
Help yourself to a miracle. Now in one shopping trip, the average family can buy a full week's supply of groceries.
The model was so successful that in 1930, there was exactly one supermarket. Just 5 years later, there were thousands. The only thing left to do was to keep making supermarkets bigger and bigger.
But without competition and regulation, the bigger and cheaper model allows for just 2 or 3 firms to grow so big they have a real advantage. And it simultaneously creates a cost-cutting race to the bottom for everyone, including those giants. You may never have set foot in a Kroger or Albertsons, but you probably recognize some of the stores that they now control. These brands are tombstones in a graveyard of chains that Kroger and Albertsons gobbled up over the years as they've gotten bigger and bigger. Their brand names give the illusion of a diverse marketplace. But from 1993 to 2019, the number of grocery stores nationwide declined by roughly 30%. The biggest brands tripled their control of grocery sales, with 5 chains controlling 60% of the market. This merger will make things much worse.
First, it will give the new firm huge leverage over its workers. The combined duo would become America's largest private unionized employer, and if history is any guide, they will use that power against workers. As the grocery industry has consolidated, workers' living conditions have declined.
Like a show of hands, can you guys show me how many people feel comfortable with what they're paid each week? Do you feel like you're living a comfortable life? Anybody?
A recent report found that up to 75% of Kroger employees faced food insecurity. 14% experienced homelessness.
Imagine working in a grocery store, handling food all day when your family is going hungry. Is this the dystopia that you want to live in?
A merger will also be dependent on large-scale layoffs in warehousing operations and other behind-the-scenes jobs that keep a store running. grocery becomes a reverse Robin Hood, taking all those cost savings from synergies, layoffs, and funneling them into rich executives and institutional investors who own large swaths of stock. This isn't cynicism or theory. We just watched it happen during COVID.
Grocery purchases surged. Americans bought more than ever. Kroger's profits went up 90%. And what happened? Kroger gave, quote, essential workers a $2 per hour raise for 6 weeks. Then it canceled the raise. And then it sunk its profits into 2 separate billion-dollar buybacks, rewarding executives and investors. And prices didn't go down, they went up.
Sire, you have an absolute skill for encouraging contributions from the poor.
And this brings us to how this merger will impact you, the consumer.
A little bit of inflation is always good in our business.
So that's Kroger's CEO Rodney McMullen spilling the beans on how grocers like Kroger and Albertsons took advantage of the inflation narrative to gouge consumers and rake in extra profits. Some analyses have shown that over 50% of price inflation has been driven by corporate profits. For every extra dollar you are paying this past year, 54 cents has just been pure corporate profit. And consolidation in the grocery industry is a big driver of this dynamic. Don't believe us? Compare restaurants to grocery stores. Both restaurants and groceries suffered from inflation, but Americans' grocery costs have inflated almost 5 points higher. Why? Because restaurants exist in a relatively healthy industry defined by lots of small chains and heavy competition, while grocery has been reduced to just a handful of swollen conglomerates operating as a massive oligopoly. Research shows when there is less competition, price savings get turned into corporate profits. And if allowed to go through, this merger will set off a wave of regional grocery mergers that will further concentrate the marketplace.
We need a new model. In 1944, the government moved to break up the great A&P, which at its peak only controlled 12% of the US grocery market. This new Kroger-Albertsons chain would sit at 15% instantly. Walmart is already at 27, Costco at 9. The creation of these giant chains was intentional policy. Over the last 50 years, antitrust protection has weakened as regulators allowed mergers to go through as long as prices stayed low.
But COVID-19 destroyed this illusion. Not only do we see the effects of overconsolidation and high prices, we see it in fragile, just-in-time supply chains that can't shift with erratic demand.
This deal is rotten. If the FTC doesn't block it, what's the point of the FTC?
But here we're optimistic. New chairwoman Lena Khan understands the importance of preventing mergers like this one.
An inflationary environment can give cover to companies with market power or monopoly power to exploit that power.
But regulators and policymakers should do more than just block Kroger and Albertsons merger. They need to take a hard look at the grocery industry's race to the bottom, where cost savings come out of workers and the environment. If every store needs to size up to compete, that necessarily means competing against fewer and fewer stores. It just doesn't work.
Just as the supermarket was America's gift to the world in the 1930s, we can lead the way to a more just food system today.
We need enforcement of antitrust laws such as the Robinson-Patman Act. We need to look at breaking up the grocery giants to encourage the growth of cooperative, employee-owned and family-owned grocery chains and stores that reflect our community's diversity and regionality.
We can build strong unions with strong industry-wide wages and safety standards.
And we need to start building a public food sector, or a public option for our food system. Food should be a right, and there are major issues in our food system that even the most well-intentioned private industry just can't solve.
The same ingenuity that revolutionized an inefficient model in the 1930s will be required to reinvent the unjust ones we have today.
The good news is, we know it can be done.